So, we'll put a pin in that, and then for the people who watch this show and know me, they've probably heard this, but just to for you guys who haven't heard it, my first experience with critical race theory, intersectionality during Occupy was, if I agreed with them, they would recognize my mixed heritage. If I disagree with them, they would accuse me of being a wealthy white male. Clearly, none of that was true, but it was just, if you disagree with us, you're a white man. And then I'm like, well, my mom is actually, and I'm from the South Side, I'm poor. And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, So just depending
even though
on,
none of your ideas changed, it's just like now they've reframed.
I was told explicitly that I, needed to reconsider my opinions as a white man. And then when I explained, actually, I'm a high school dropout from the South Side of Chicago and I'm from a mixed race family, then all of a sudden these white liberals went, oh, now I see what you're saying. Like, legit. All of a sudden now it's like, oh, I'm like, the most disrespectful and insane thing I ever experienced. I was like, what is this? Like, do you have an actual argument?
Well, it's reductive. And that's the dehumanizing part. It's reductive for the person who's on the receiving end of that, to literally be told, you cannot speak on this topic because you are XYZ. Like, you just don't even get a seat at the table. But then I think it's dehumanizing for the person who is holding the view. And so equally, like, I'm concerned about the people who are being treated this way, and having their lives ruined because they're being canceled or whatever. They're going to lose their job. They're going to be smeared in all the newspapers, and their reputation is in shambles at the end of it. And I'm concerned for them, but I'm also concerned for the people who have bought into it, because it's really a dangerous way to look at other human beings.
So after you start noticing this is critical gender theory stuff popping up.
Yeah.
You mentioned that they realized it wasn't working, so they changed their tactic or whatever. Well, just so walk us through what's the next thing that happens?
Well, actually, I really appreciate how you defined terms for us at the beginning and read that definition of critical theory. That's super helpful. And that's kind of the next tack we took, was like, okay, it seems like we're talking two different languages. Like, we're saying, no, we're doing justice. Like, that's why we started this organization. It's about justice. It's about, disparities in mental health care, that, most of the world that needs mental health care doesn't have the resources they need. That's why this organization exists. And you're telling us that we're not doing justice. So I think we need to define some terms, and so we really started there. I can't remember which the first one was that I did, but I just started cranking out organizational position papers that essentially defined terms. And we at that point, we had entered into like a formal series of, I don't know a better word for it than struggle sessions. It was these all org meetings with the board chair present, sometimes a third party mediator present, trying to just even figure out like what is needed, where is the harm, because there was all these accusations of this organization is causing harm, there is harm, but it was always in that kind of passive voice, like it wasn't ever like, you harmed me when you said this. It was always, there is harm. And so we were like, okay, first thing we need to define is psychological safety. What does it mean? Because that term is being thrown around, like psychological safety has been violated. I can't even trust, I can't have a conversation with you with your ideas or whatever, the things you've said. And it's like, okay, fine. Let's look up what psychological safety actually is and define it. And we defined it based on The Coddling of the American Mind. I don't know if you're familiar with that book. But,
is that Jonathan Haidt?
Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff. And so they really go into like the psychology behind what's sort of happening on university campuses right now, and now has, like overflowed into the whole culture. And so I used a lot of the material from that book. And then Amy Edmondson is a professor at Harvard Business School who coined the term psychological safety, and I used a lot of her research. And then I used some trauma-informed models of psychological safety, which is, we do trauma work. So very much all in alignment with each other. So you've got this like business school perspective. You've got these guys who wrote this book about the phenomenon in college campuses, and you've got these trauma-informed groups that basically teach about how to be safe when you're working with trauma survivors, because it's like a whole other level of safety, right? And essentially what we saw is, while these people were trying to be helpful to people who have been hurt, it's like, yes, there is racism. Yes, there is, discrimination against people with different identities. Totally agree. But what you're doing when you say, like you said, if you don't speak, this thing into the space, this person's going to be erased, is like, you're essentially saying that person has no agency. They're the biggest wimp on the planet, that if people don't like validate them at every moment and affirm them and clap for them and do whatever they say, they're going to fall apart and dissolve.
Have you seen the DSA meetings, the viral videos?
No.
So this is the Democratic Socialists of America. These are a series of viral videos where I wasn't there. I can't tell you what the whole several hours looked like, but in a span of a few minutes, every time someone spoke, they offended someone. And so
this is an old video. I've seen this.
Yeah, a couple years.
Yes,
it was
the
like a year or two.
point of personal privilege.
And
people.
the one guy says, "Guys, please, the chattering is giving me anxiety." And
Right.
then someone goes, "Don't say guys." And then
exactly.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So
that's an extreme version of what I mean.
Right.
But
it's what happens when you take all of those people and put them in the same room together.
Well, yes, exactly. When your sense of self is dependent on others validating you and others accommodating you, I think narcissism is a great word for it. Entitlement is another great word for it. And it's counterintuitive because it's like, if a person's been hurt a lot, there is this sense of like, we need to take care and we don't want to, make them feel unsafe. But also it's like counterintuitive in that this person probably actually needs to be pushed out of their comfort zone,
Well, so you're having these company struggle sessions. Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't sound to me like these people actually wanted to help anyone. It sounded like they just wanted to have power and bully.
I wouldn't characterize them that way. They're definitely geared towards helping people, but again, it's the strategies versus values. Like they really, because you have to applaud them for living in integrity with the moral framework that they've adopted. Like they truly believe like this is how social justice is done. And so they're carrying it out according to that conception of reality, that Marxian framework that you just read about, where it says this constant, like, so somebody's in power and the person who's marginalized or disenfranchised, they have no say in the conversation. So all the norms are just established by discourse. There's nothing actually objective. See, that's the real shift. Not these social categories of race and biological sex and gender identity and all these things. Those are really weapons towards what is actually under assault, which is objective truth. Yes. Which is why this whole moral panic, that took place over the last whatever period of time, I kind of think of it as an epistemological panic. It's like it really disoriented people in terms of how they can know whether something is helpful and true and just, and then their methods of getting to how they know what they know also were under assault because science itself is under assault as a way to know. If
you understand their view that there is, it's all about power dynamics. Mm-hmm. The ideology, the underlying moral framework held by critical theorists, and the expanding umbrella is there is no truth but power. That's a core function of their belief. It was one of the core tenets of fascists.
Right.
So they're not ultranationalists, but they hold that authoritarian worldview, which is why it may be true that there are individuals who think they're helping by doing it.
Yes.
But certainly these are organizations and these are corporations that are exploiting it for wealth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are different, varying degrees to which people understand what they're involved with, right? I think there are certainly people who understand that this is a tool that can be used to radically transform our system of government and consolidate power. And then, like I said, there are like the foot soldiers who are just doing what they're supposed to do within their moral framework, who really think that they're helping people. They really see this as like, oh my goodness, it's the critical consciousness, right? That's the word that's used. That's where the word woke comes from, is that your consciousness has finally been awakened to the reality of power and oppression, these structures of power and oppression that are everywhere and you just didn't see them before. So it's like their mandate now. I mean, it's this conversion language, right? It's like, I was blind, but now I see. And so it's like, so I see this thing now, and these poor white, straight, cis, het, whatever people, they don't see how they're oppressing. And so if I care about the people who are being oppressed, I have to help them understand how they're part of the oppression.
Just like when I hear from Christians who say, I don't want you to go to hell, so I have to tell you and teach you.
Exactly. It's like, if that's my moral framework, I don't love you if I'm like, I think you're going to hell, but I don't care. Good luck.
Yeah.
Some issues I'm having with it is, as you said, Ibram X. Kennedy said that denying racism, or Kennedy, that one of the 10 aspects of racism is denying racism, but questioning something is not denying something. Mm-hmm. That's very important to understand. And also, questioning critical theory, for people to have an issue with that seems counterintuitive, because the whole point of critical theory is to question power structures.
It is.
So it itself should be questioned.
That's why I don't say, I hear, you'll hear from people like Christopher Rufo, it's critical race theory. Well, that completely excludes critical gender theory. And that just excludes everything which is underneath the umbrella of critical
Well,
theory in general.
he is focusing specifically on critical race theory.
Right.
That's his mission. So yes, but the terms are really sloppy. Like you'll hear people refer broadly to critical race theory when they mean critical theory. And that's part of the problem. But it's like, I think that's just the nature of when a social philosophy or a critical theory makes it into the mainstream, and it really just becomes more about the phraseology more than the philosophy. So people know the jargon and they know what you're supposed to do and what you're supposed to support and what you're not supposed to support. They don't know the philosophy behind it.
I think it's another big mistake, because it is a huge failure of the anti-woke to embrace critical theory as their target, because now what we see are the woke left saying, okay, name a critical theorist and give me the idea that you have a problem with. And then what happens is they pull up specific quotes from like Ben Shapiro, where he'll read one quote and say, well, actually, I agree with that one. The issue is that critical theory isn't, as a whole, the real problem we're experiencing. What we're experiencing is the fascistic ideology, there is no truth but power, which in many ways is rooted in critical theorists and in Frankfurt School, etc. But it's well beyond any particular identity group, race, or gender. It is just a group of people who will claim harm in any way and exploit the system in any way. And right now they found an attack vector. We as a society don't like racism. We don't like bigotry. We don't like discrimination. They attack that by saying, you're being racist. When you try and then ask them what that means, they'll give you a different definition each time, because it's not critical race theory. It is just an authoritarian fascistic tactic towards gaining power.
Yeah, and it's incoherent and it's a double standard, but they are acting according to the theory, which says everything is socially constructed. So you can continue to reinterpret. It's reinterpretations of reinterpretations of reinterpretations, because there's nothing ultimately real. It's postmodernism. It's postmodern. Yes. It's postmodern philosophy put into like a management theory for how to keep people in line.
It seems to me like it's what happens when you have no moral framework. I suppose there is one. There is no truth but power. I think one of the things I've often talked about is the difference between the two factions in the culture war. There's a lot of different definitions you'll get. People will say libertarian versus authoritarian, globalist versus nationalist, left versus right, whatever. I think one core separation may be Judeo-Christian moral framework versus absence of moral framework, just power dynamics. And so the example I give is Bill Maher, for instance, often talks about how you don't need religion to be moral. However, he believes in many classically liberal principles which are founded in Judeo-Christian moral framework. For instance, the example I often give, ad nauseum to the audience who knows this already, is the Fifth Amendment, a right to a speedy trial, innocent until proven guilty, the right to remain silent. The core of innocent until proven guilty is Blackstone's formulation, which was inspired by the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, literally out of the Bible. So you take away these moral frameworks. Bill Maher, who was raised in a Judeo-Christian society, who understood these things, but without the religion, doesn't understand how that framework changes, how that forms society and what that means in terms of justice. You now have an entirely new, purely secular religion, or whatever you want to call it, non-theistic religion, with no core moral framework other than the writings of critical theory and a bunch of other. I mean, there's other non-critical theorists who are included in their citations often, and the ideas they have is just get power by any means necessary. Period.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, talking about the framework that's being replaced, because I've also heard, as everyone's trying to figure out what do we do about this woke movement, what do we do, is just sort of like just get rid of it. And I'm like, that's not enough. You need a positive moral vision to replace the moral vision that has become embraced by many people, because I do agree that it has religious connotations. It's a way of understanding yourself in relationship to the world and then acting out of what you believe in a morally integrated way. And that's the definition of religion. And so it's like, okay, so you can just say, let's just get rid of all these, critical social justice people and the woke movement, and that'll be good. It's like, no, because there's clearly like a hunger here for something. Power, yes, but belonging, and
purpose.
having a moral purpose that you can attach to clear aims. So like that kind of teleological argument that is like, there's something that we're aiming for, that society is aiming for, that each human being is made for, and so all of that is is providing people with meaning. And you see like very religious kind of activity coming out of this, ritual and confession and conversion kind of. I mean, so it's like you can't just replace that with nothing.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.